The key thing with multiplying and dividing by 10, 100 and 1000 is that we often at school learn approaches or techniques to quickly get to the answer. The problem is, of course, it can lead to misconceptions. It can lead to, certainly with some students, not understanding what's going on. And so, for example, you say, right, if you multiply a number by 10, you add a nought. So if we have 23, and I multiply that by 10, I get 230. And also, if you multiply a number by 100, you add two noughts. So if I had 45, and I multiply that by 100, I get 4,500. But what happens if you say you've got 2.3? Well, 2.3 multiplied by 10 does not equal 2.30. And you might say, well, that's obvious. The problem is that people do fall into this trap. Those people who are not so confident with their mathematics, they'll hear this rule about adding noughts or adding two noughts, whatever, and then they struggle when dealing with decimals. Also, what do we do when we're dividing by 10, 100 and 1000? The other rule that is often used when dealing with this kind of work is about the moving of the decimal point. You move the decimal point so many places to the left or to the right. The thing is that the decimal point doesn't move within the number system. And so what I want to do is I want to look at the number system, the relationship between the columns of the number system, and use that to help us in understanding what to do when we are multiplying and dividing by 10, 100 and 1000. So here's our structure of the decimal system. And you're probably aware that the first column, if we've got the units, we've got the tens, we've got the hundreds, and we've got the thousands. And then we've got the tenths, we've got the hundreds, and we've got the thousands. And this is just a shorthand way of writing those columns down. What I want to do is I want to rewrite the columns to look like this. So instead of units, I write down 1. Instead of 10, I write down the number 10. I then write down 100, and I write down 1000. Similarly, instead of tenths, I'll write down a tenth like so. For 100th, I'm going to write the fraction equivalent, and similarly for 1000th, we're going to write it like so. And I tend to find this way of writing the columns of our number system very helpful because it introduces us to other kinds of mathematics. But anyway, we're here to focus on multiplying and dividing by 10, 100 and 1000. Let's look at the relationship between the columns. Starting with the units. If I multiply 1, if I multiply it by 10, I get 10. If I multiply 10 by 10, I get 100. If I multiply 100 by 10, I get 1000. And this applies right across the number system. A tenth multiplied by 10 is equal to 1. 100th multiplied by 10 is equal to a tenth. 1000th multiplied by 10 is equal to 100th. So we can see that if we look at any column in our decimal structure, the column to the left of any column is 10 times greater. So how does this help us with multiplying by 10? Well, let's look at 23 multiplied by 10. Well, we do know that 23 multiplied by 10 is 230. I'm going to write down 23 and let's write down what we know is the answer is 230. So remember, this is the number that we are multiplying by, the 10. And look at the columns. Our columns to the left of any column is 10 times greater. Look at what's happened to the number that we're multiplying, the 23. Look what's happened to the decimals 2 and 3 as we have multiplied by 10. So the 2 is in the tens column. It's now gone into the hundreds column. And the 3 has gone from the units column into the tens column. So by multiplying by 10, the digits have moved one place to the left, because the column to the left of any column is 10 times greater, and we're multiplying by 10. Now, of course, because of place value, the 2 represents 2 hundreds and the 3 represents 3 tens, so we then need to put a nought in to show that there are no units, and then we know that that is 230. Hence why we've added a nought. What about 2.3? 2.3 multiplied by 10. Well, let's write down 2.3. And the same process applies. We're multiplying by 10. And so when we're multiplying by 10, what's going to happen is that the 2, which is currently in the units column, is going to move one column to the left. It's going to move into the tens column. So the 2 moves to there, and our 3, which is currently in the tenths column, we're multiplying by 10, so the 3 moves into the units column. So we actually end up with 23 as our answer. If I had 0.015 multiplied by 10, well, let's write the 0.015 down. We're multiplying by 10. So our 1 is going to move from the hundredths column into the tenths column, and the 5 is going to move from the thousandth column into the hundredths column. Now, because both these digits are after decimal point, we need to put a decimal point in and put a nought in. So the answer is 0.15. We can see when we're multiplying by 10, the digits move one column to the left, because the column to the left of any column is 10 times greater, as shown up here with the relationship of the columns in our decimal system. Now let's look at multiplying by 100. Looking at the units column, if I multiply 1 by 100, I get 100. If I multiply 10 by 100, I get 1,000. If I multiply a tenth by 100, I get 10. If I multiply a hundredth by 100, I get 1, which makes sense because 100 hundredths is equal to 1. Do you start to see a pattern? What we have this time now is 2 places to the left of any column is 100 times greater. If I did, I've written these questions here. Let's just quickly do, if we know that 2 multiplied by 100, we know the answer is 200. So there's our 2, and there's our 200. And look what's actually happened. The 2 has moved 2 columns to the left. And this matches up with our relationship between the columns in our base 10 system, in our decimal system. And of course, we have to put 2 noughts in because we need to show that that 2 represents 2 hundredths. And so because of place value, we need to put a nought in the tens column and a nought in the ones column to let me know that that is 200. So when we're looking at, for example, 1.2 multiplied by 100. So there's 1.2. The digits in that number are going to move 2 columns to the left. So the 1, which is currently in the units column, is going to end up in the hundreds column. And the 2, that is currently in the tenths column, is going to end up in the tens column. Again, we need to put a nought in the units column because of place value reasons. We need to show that that is 100 and 2 tens. We then know that the answer is 120. 1.2 multiplied by 100 is 120. If we have, for example, 0.004, so 0.004, here is the digit 4 that we're dealing with. The 4 is going to move 2 columns to the left. So the 4 is moving from the thousandths column to the tenths column. So the 4 is going to end up here. Now we need to show that that is 4 tenths. So we need to put our nought in here, 0.4, and there's our answer. 7.05 or 7.05 multiplied by 100. So we have 7.05. We're going to multiply it by 100. So the 7 is going to move 2 columns to the left. So the 7 is now moved from the units to the hundreds column. Let's just move out a little bit so you can see the hundreds there. So the 7 has moved into that column there. The thing is if you think of 7.05, you've got those 3 digits. You've got the 7, the 0 and the 5. Effectively, once you've established the first digit, the position of the first digit of the number that you're multiplying by 100 or 10 or 1000, everything else sort of falls into place. So I know that the 0 will go here and the 5 is going to go here. And if we look, the 0 has found itself moving from the tenths column. It's moved 2 columns into the tens column. And the 5 has moved from the hundredths column into the units column. So the answer there is 705. 40.051. 40.051. We're multiplying by 100. Well, let's deal with the first digit of the number that we're multiplying by 100, which is the 4. The 4 moves from the tens column into the thousands column. All the other digits, the 0, the 5 and the 1, all now follow into place. So we have the 0, the 5 and the 1. And remember, we need to put the decimal point in. And we can see that the 0 has moved 2 columns to the left. This 0 here, the 0 that's in the tenths column, that's moved into the tens column. The 5 that's in the hundredths column, is now moved into the ones column or the units column. And the 1 that was in the thousandths column has moved into the tenths column. And so the answer to this one here is 4005.1. So there is multiplying by 100. We multiply by 10. The digits move 1 column to the left. We multiply by 100. The digits move 2 columns to the left. If we multiply by 1000, the digits move 3 columns to the left. And we can see this, can't we? If we look at the columns, 1 multiplied by 1000 is equal to 1000. 1/10 multiplied by 1000 is equal to 100. 100th multiplied by 1,000 is equal to 10, and 1,000th multiplied by 1,000 is of course equal to 1, because 1,000 thousandths is equal to 1. So when we're multiplying by 1,000, the digits are moving 3 places to the left. So 1.3 multiplied by 1,000. Well, let's just move the first digit, which is the 1. So the 1 is going to move. The 1's going to move from the units column into the thousand column. So the 1 has moved there, and of course the digit 3 follows suit and moves from the tenths column into the hundredths column. And then we now need to put in a nought for the tens column and a nought for the units column, so that we know that that 1 represents 1,000, and we know that the 3 represents 3 hundredths. 0.004 multiplied by 1,000. 0.004. Well, let's deal with the digit 4. The 4 is going to move 3 columns to the left. 1, 2, 3. The 4 ends up here in the units column. So the answer is equal to 4. We don't need to do anything else with this number. And finally, we've got 4.03. We're multiplying by 1,000. The 4 is going to move 3 places to the left. It's going to move from the units column into the thousand column. The other digits in this number, the 0 and the 3, follow suit. So we can see now that the 0 has moved from the tenths column into the hundredths column, and the 3 has moved into the hundredths column. We now need to put a nought in here to show that there are no units. We need to put a nought in to show that the 4 is 4,000, that the nought represents the hundredths column. We've got 3 lots of 10, and now we put the nought in here to show that there are no units. If I didn't put this nought in here, it would say 403. So it's very important to make sure you put your nought in. Anyway, here are 6 questions for you to try and have a go at them. So pause the video, have a go at the questions, and when you're ready, press play and I'll go through the answers. So I'm assuming now that you've gone through the questions and answered the questions. Well, let's quickly go through the answers. 8 multiplied by 10 is equal to 80. 43 multiplied by 100 is 3,400. 43.6 multiplied by 10 is going to give you 436. 4.73 multiplied by 1,000 is going to give you 4,730. 0.65 multiplied by 1,000 is going to give you 650. And 5.003 multiplied by 100 is 500.3. Whilst there are certain techniques that you might learn at school about adding noughts and moving decimal points, I think it helps to really understand how the decimal system works. Next, I'm going to look at dividing by 10, 100 and 1,000. If you understand this, if you understand what's going on here, then hopefully you'll understand what's going on when we are dividing by 10, 100 and 1,000. As we know the relationship of the columns when it comes to multiplying, it actually works the other way round when we're looking at dividing. So if we look at the columns, 1,000 divided by 10 is equal to 100. 100 divided by 10 is equal to 10. 10 divided by 10 is equal to 1. 1 divided by 10 is equal to a tenth. There's some fraction work going on here. A tenth divided by 10 is equal to a hundredth. A hundredth divided by 10 is equal to a thousandth. So when we are dividing by 10, the digits, so let's have a quick look here. 30 divided by 10 you should know is 3. If you know your 10 times table, there's the number that we started with. There's the answer. We are dividing by 10. Look at the relationship between the columns. The 3, our digit 3 in the number 30, has moved one column to the right. And this matches up with our relationship between the columns in our decimal system. So if we have, for example, 43, and we divide that by 10, the same thing's going to happen. The 4 moves from the tens column into the units column, and the 3, the digit 3, which is currently in the units column, is going to move into the tenths column. And of course we need to put in a decimal point, so we know that the 4 represents 4 units and the 3 represents 3 tenths. And so the answer to 43 divided by 10 is 4.3. 0.6 divided by 10. You might want to have a go at this yourself. So pause the video. I'm now going to go through the answer. So here's 0.6. I'm going to divide it by 10. The 6, the digit 6, is moving from the tenths column, is moving one place into the hundredths column. We now need to establish the position of that 6 in our number. So we need to put 0.06. So that's dividing by 10. Let's look at dividing by 100. Let's look at the relationship. I'm hoping now that you're ahead of the game. 1000 divided by 100 is equal to 10. 100, of course, divided by 100 is equal to 1. 10 divided by 100 is equal to a tenth. 1 divided by 100, as you should know, is a hundredth. And then a tenth divided by 100 is equal to a thousandth. So when we are dividing by 100, the digits in that number are moving 2 columns to the right because of the relationship between the columns in the decimal system. 600 divided by 100 you should probably know is equal to 6. There's 600. There's our answer, 6. Notice that the digit 6 has moved 2 columns to the right. It's moved from the hundreds column into the units column. 51.6 divided by 100. Let's look at the first digit of 51.6, which is 5. So the 5 is going to move 2 columns to the right. So the 5 moves from the tens column into the tenths column. And then the other digits should follow suit. We've got the 1 and the 6 like so. And you should see that the 1 has basically moved from the units column, it's moved into the hundredths column, and the 6 has moved from the tenths column into the thousandth column. Again, place value. We need to show that that's 5 tenths, 1 hundredth, and 6 thousandths. So we need to put the decimal point in, and we need to put a naught in. So that's 0.516. And finally, 100.7 divided by 100. So 100.7 divided by 100. Okay, so the 1 is going to move 2 columns to the right. So the 1 moves from the hundreds column into the ones column. The other digits, the nought, and the 7, 007. So let's put a decimal point in. And then we have 0, 0, 7. So we have 1.007 is our answer. When you are dividing by 10, 100, and also when we do 1,000, the key thing is once you've established where the first digit is, the other digits follow suit in the same order. Anyway, let's look at dividing by 1,000. When we are dividing by 10, the digits are moving 1 column to the right. When we divide by 100, the digits are moving 2 columns to the right. If we divide by 1,000, the digits move 3 columns to the right. And let's have a look. 1,000, I'm looking at the columns now, 1,000 divided by 1,000 is equal to 1. 100 divided by 1,000 is equal to a tenth. 10 divided by 1,000 is equal to 100th, and 1 divided by 1,000 is equal to 1,000th. So, looking at 37 divided by 1,000, 37. Let's look, we'll begin with the digit 3. The 3 is going to move 3 columns to the right. It ends up in the hundredths column. So our 3 has ended up here. And the 7 follows suit. The 7 must follow on afterwards. And so the 7 has gone from the units column into the thousandth column. We now need to show that that's 3 hundredths and 7 thousandths. So we need to put the decimal point in. We need to put a nought in to show that there are no tenths. And we put a nought in the units column. So we now have 0.037. Of course, 4,000 divided by 1,000, you should know, is equal to 4. 4,000. The 4 is going to move from the thousands column into the ones column because it's moving 3 columns to the right. So the 4 ends up there. You might want to have a go at the next 2 questions. So pause the video and have a go. Otherwise, just keep playing. So 7,005 divided by 1,000. So the 7 moves from the 1,000 column into the ones column. Now look what happens. We've got the nought and the nought and the 5. They should follow on afterwards. So I'll put a decimal point in. We've got 0, 0, 5. And we can see that the nought that's in the hundreds column is now in the tenths column. The nought that's in the tens column is now in the hundreds column. And the 5 that's in the ones column is now in the thousandth column. 290 divided by 1,000. So let's write the 290 in. And we're going to divide by 1,000. So let's deal with the digit 2. The digit 2 is going to move from the hundreds column 3 columns to the right, and it's going to take us into the tenths column. So the 2 is going to end up here. The 9 is going to follow on, and so does the nought. Now, I'll talk about the nought in a minute. Let's just deal first of all. We need to put a decimal point in because we need to show that this 2 is 2 tenths and the 9 is 9 hundredths, and we then also put a nought in. I'm going to write the answer as 0.29. We don't need to put the nought in. You're not wrong if you put 0.290. You are not wrong in doing that, okay? But you don't have to. So when we're dividing, it's by 10, 100, and 1,000. It's the opposite to our multiplying. This time, the digits in the number that we are dividing by 10, 100, and 1,000 are moving 1, 2, and 3 columns to the right, respectively. I'm hoping that you understand what I've done here. Anyway, here's some questions for you to have a go at. Pause the video And when you're ready, I'll go through the answers. I'll just quickly give you the answers. Question 1, 63.2 divided by 10 is 6.32. So the digits have all moved one column to the right. 0.8 divided by 10 is 0.08. So the digit 8 has moved one column to the right. 228.6 divided by 100. So this time the columns are moving 2 places to the right. So we end up with 2.286. And then for question 4, we have 6,334 divided by 1,000. So the digits are moving 3 columns to the right. So you end up with 6.334. You've then got 753.6 divided by 1,000. So again, the digits are all moving 3 places to the right. So the 7 is moving. This is more complicated. The 7 is moving from the hundreds column. It's going to end up in our tenths column, and the digits follow on afterwards. So we end up with 0.7536. And then we have 0.02 divided by 100 is 0.0002. When you're doing these types of questions, particularly with decimals dividing by 10, 100 and 1000, by all means sketch out a grid like I've done here. If it helps you just to get your head around the position of digits, by all means draw the grid. But anyway, that's a quick look at how we multiply and divide by 10, 100 and 1000. I hope you found it helpful, and thank you for watching.